All right, we're live. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of your vegan supplement. I'm here with Jeremy Hess today, and we're doing this live. I didn't do my last episode live, but I figured since I am kind of interviewing people that might have similar views to mine, we'd go ahead and open the floor to questions of maybe people who have different opinions, and it might liven up the conversation even. So, this is Jeremy Hess. Jeremy, I tell you what, why don't you tell everybody about a little bit about yourself, and especially your interest in language, because that's really kind of what we're framing this around today.
Yeah, thanks Stacy for having me on, and hello everyone. Amir and Bao, it looks like already we've got. But yeah, it's quite a path I think we go on, not using the journey language, but I think for me, I initially thought veganism would be kind of the end, and for me it was kind of the beginning of so many things.
Yeah.
And just kind of a quick elevator pitch. I mean, I started living vegan in Singapore, so I didn't have a huge amount of opportunity to do kind of your typical street outreach and so forth. But it was really just, I did kind of the long transition, unfortunately, from vegetarian, then pescatarian, then eventually to vegan.
Yeah.
So I was one of those. But I really just saw a mom being used for her milk being separated from her son, and that's when it really just clicked for me. And it was a non-graphic video, which is maybe something we can talk about later on. But yeah, really my first touch point with animal advocacy proper was I read a book called Motivational Methods for Vegan Advocacy,
Uh-huh.
by Casey Taft, and that was really around the communication skills, and that's where I really kind of switched from kind of avoiding the conversation to being at least neutral or even seeking it out. And then since then, I just kind of went down this path and really just, it's become a passion of mine. I kind of equate it to like playing a game of chess, like
Yeah.
meeting someone, what's their experience, what's my experience, and kind of just exploring it together.
Yeah.
I
The
find it's quite
language around
useful.
everything and how to approach it. And
Yeah.
you have a group, or is it a website? I'll make sure I didn't include it when I did the banner for this, but I'll after this video post to Facebook or YouTube. It's on both right now, but I will make sure to give your information and your website's information. You have a website, right?
Yeah, that sounds great. I mean, they're kind of interlinked. If you go to my website, the website's veganinteractions.com. So
Okay.
hopefully easy to remember. That was the idea at least. But that actually links to the language group I help to admin. I didn't start it, but I'm a passionate member and eventually kind of started help kind of creating more of the content for there.
Okay.
But yeah, that's unlearning speciesist language.
Yeah.
And to me, that's just been an amazing sandbox because while I think communication skills are important, I've actually found people are more intrigued by the idea of language. And I think it starts with realizing not to refer to, animals as it.
Yeah.
And I've started to liking referring to them as our fellow animals. And it's just,
Yeah.
there's so, like, basically every sentence we construct in our mind represents how we view the world and others, as well as how people are going to interpret, that message and help to shape their worldview. So that's why I think it's so critical to be mindful about this stuff.
Yeah, and so that kind of leads up to what brought us to this conversation today, because you were having a conversation on your channel the other day, and yeah, I noticed, and I'm probably guilty of this myself. I'm sure I am. Everybody slips up in their language. I try to be more mindful of it nowadays. Um, and recently, I've noticed I've had a real problem with calling it our movement. And I brought that up at the end of your stream. And so we figured we'd just go ahead and have a conversation about it here. And that's why the title, Veganism versus Animal Rights, is it our movement or theirs? That's what I mean by that. Um, and so, yeah, we want to discuss about, well, I'm sure it's going to be tied in with other topics. But but yeah, so I guess I am what your guest would have called an animals only advocate.
Yeah, and that's not necessarily terminology I use myself, but I hear what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah, I do prefer to put animals first and focus on that in my advocacy. I feel like I look at it Well, like in the beginning, I called it the vegan community. I believe there is a vegan community, but I don't call it a vegan movement anymore because I'm animal rights. I think it's their movement, and that's what we should be focused on. But that's my opinion, and I know there's difference of opinions out there. Um, but when I'm doing my advocacy, I yeah, I don't want politics and all this other stuff involved. I want to be a mouthpiece on their behalf. You know what I mean?
Mm. Mm.
So,
Yeah,
all
yeah, and I
right,
think
Roger. Hello, Roger. I knew
hello,
you'd be here.
Roger.
So he says
Yeah, so
animals. Go ahead.
I might be. I was just gonna say, I think maybe what you were, but yeah, the animals first and animals only, kind of that distinction there, because I think what I've observed, and the stream you were referring to towards the end, that where your comment came up, I think there's a lot of similarities actually in how we discuss these things, but there's just a gap in understanding each other.
Yeah.
Because I think my perspective is very much, and something that Rogers really helped me with, is the idea of focus versus scope. And I
Hmm.
do think that how we apply this is important to like get into the bolts of that. But just generally speaking, if we think of the focus being on our fellow animals and then having peripheral issues that we don't go to, in my opinion, unless we have to, but they're there if we kind of need them, or they'll strengthen the case, for our
Yeah.
fellow animals. That's kind of my take on it. That's a very crude summary of that. Whereas I think I mean, maybe Rasha can clarify, but I think that's the difference between saying it's only about them versus it's focused on them, as well as these other issues that may help strengthen the case for them effectively. That's kind of the
Yeah, I
distinction I would
mean,
make
there
there.
are obviously other issues we have to bring up when we're talking to other humans but this brings us to what you were talking about, is the movement becoming human centric? Because, yeah, I like my veganism all right, I should say, I do use the language of scope when I need to, but I always
Mm,
steer it back. But I
mm,
would consider myself an animals only person, maybe, if to correct myself the way Roger said it, in my advocacy, because I don't feel it's about me. I want to be a mouthpiece. I look at my animal rights as I am working for them.
mm,
That I am representing them. I'm a mouthpiece for them. I need to fight for their rights. Um, and so you were asking in your live stream, do we think it's become human centric? I do. I think that
mm,
the movement has become very human centric. So,
mm,
but here's a question from Bo. Or a statement, I should say. Non-vegans frequently make the mistake of thinking veganism is about vegans. For example, I respect vegans, or I heard a vegan diet can be healthy, but veganism is about the animals, not about us. I would, I agree with that. I agree with that. See, that's how I feel about it. And yeah, most human movements are about people. So people who don't understand veganism often make the mistake this is about us or health or environment. And I think, you know, that's something that was brought up, was about the scope of things, and whether it's become the focus. And unfortunately, I think it's become the focus. So and that's why the title, because every time we talk about something, it's about how does it affect me? How does it affect me? When you talk to other people about
yeah.
animal rights, it's like, well, what about me? What about me? What about me? Or, well, this person can't do it because you shouldn't ask them to do it because of this and because of that. And I don't know. Why don't you take over a little bit? You elaborate on this subject.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think, I mean, I would share a lot of your thoughts around the whole, the our movement versus their movement. I mean, I think the key thing I think I found with language is that the audience and the context are the key things to establish. I mean, I think if there's two quarreling animal advocates, I think there could be strength to talking about it being our movement, as in it's not like, we're working together in this. However, I do think, terms like animal movement anything where the A word is worked in, I think is typically stronger because the people are more likely to think about, animals or, other animals. Yeah, we've got a lot of comments going in the chat here
Yeah,
though.
a
This is
lot of
great. We got
hellos. Hello, guys.
Louis, Guywin, Twisted,
And I know that
Joey.
we had a
Yeah,
comment at the very beginning when we started. I'll try to come back to that. I just we kind of flowed in one direction here. Um,
but yeah, I think it's almost maybe we could talk about what veganism and animal rights means to each of us because I think that might help clarify it. Because I think while the perception of veganism is human centric, and the perception's human centric, it is an overall guiding philosophy. However, I take kind of a third read of it as like generally when I'm doing outreach, it's a tangible next step when people want to do something. It's
mhm.
living vegan. So that's the main application for me, although I appreciate it has those other kind of interpretations. So whereas animal rights is kind of the theory or, just respect.
Yeah.
I'm all about the respect angle. Respect for our fellow animals is the way I kind of frame it. So I'm actually really keen to start trying some new outreach around that I've just started doing the last week or so. But that's we can get into that later maybe. But yeah, an interesting comment. Who we want to know who was the one thumb down on the stream before it even started.
It's Roger.
Oh, who knows? Who knows?
No, that's all right. Whoever did that, that's fine. They can have a difference of opinion.
Well, the good
Um,
news is it's still good for the YouTube algorithm, the
that's right.
downvotes.
That's
So
right.
it's
I got a bunch of trolls from being on that vegan teachers channel a couple times. A
okay.
bunch of her trolls came over to bug me, and I'm like, "Hey, thanks for the comment."
Thanks for bumping my video out there.
All right, so yeah, here we go. Here we go. So Roger says, technically, it is our movement, the human activists, as Trash Carcass said, we are acting on behalf of other animals. Yeah, but I think how I interpreted that before, saying it is our movement, is that I feel that humans have so many movements, you know, um, that I think this is the only movement that the animals truly have if we were to focus. You know what I mean? That's why I want to focus on them, because unless you're talking about like some kind of like specialty campaign or single issue campaign, that's still not all animals, of course. They don't. The animals really don't have a movement. But there's so many human rights movements and single issue campaigns for humans as well, that I think that's why I feel the need to focus my energy on animals only in this, because I do other things. It doesn't mean that you can't do other things. Like in your vegan life, you can be intersectional or whatever in your beliefs. Like I marched in the Pride Parade. I believe in gay rights. I believe in equal rights for all people. I feed the homeless, stuff like that. But when I'm out campaigning, representing veganism or animal rights, I don't want it to be about me or the other humans or, how it affects them, you know?
Well, and I think to say the focus is animals only is compatible with the focus scope idea generally, because that is still saying like they're the focus. And my personal, I'm a numbers person, so I mean to me 80-90% of our messaging, our dialogue should be about them.
Yeah.
But yeah, even if the focus is animals only, it's still that scope part. And there's so many examples, but I think there's practical examples, if nothing else. If someone says animal rights doesn't exist, we can talk about, well, do you believe in human rights? And then how the two are related, and any number of other examples.
Yeah. I mean, when it's applicable, like you were saying before, when we need to use it. Um, but it's always got to be steered back. I think it always has to be steered back as to what, the focus is. And I think, unfortunately, it's just too often, you were talking about it being human centric. It's too often, the focus is too often put on the person themselves that you're talking to. They're worried about themselves.
Losing
And
weight and preventing diseases and all this stuff, which, if that
Yeah,
happens, great. But to me, that's a bonus. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. I think it's just a benefit of it. Those are just benefits that you get from it. But I think that if you don't focus on the animals and you get somebody to go, like they say, go vegan for health, I don't think you can go vegan for health. I think you can go plant based for health. Um,
Mm.
like, for example, it took me a while for me to learn everything, but the more I learned, the more I cut out of my life until finally I was vegan. I understood it was for animal rights and for what animals were going through, for justice for them, is what I should say. And before that, though, it was all plant based up till that point. That's why I don't think people can say they go vegan for health. I think you're just plant based until you get that it's about animal rights and about justice. Otherwise, what we end up getting is ex vegans, talking about
Yeah.
how their health got bad, or people who just misrepresent veganism. That's how we get politics involved, and personal politics, and all this infighting is because we're focused on everything. But if we could all just collectively agree on one fundamental thing, and that is that it's about justice for animals, then I think we'd have less arguments. You know?
Yeah, and to me, it's the practical applications. Like people,
Yeah.
I think oftentimes people battle over the ideas without even discussing like, what are the practical differences? Because I think most people when they're on the street and they say, "You people only care about the animals," a classic objection to veganism. Most of us would probably say, "Well, there's these other issues that it's not just about other animals. It's about more than that," and then steer it back. But there probably wouldn't be a whole lot of difference how animal advocates would navigate that one. But all of a sudden we're talking about the theory, then it's
Yeah.
this like bashing heads about it's not about this, it is about this. And then yeah, kind of loses the productivity, I think maybe.
Yeah. So Tank Muslik says, just got here. It's not their movement. They don't have movements. We have movements. It's our movement for all the animals. See, that's what I'm talking about right there. I don't. It's not their movement. I think that's an attitude that so many
That's even
people
a
have.
stronger claim. That's
Yeah,
that's a bit hard for me to
and
process.
I think
So
that's where it's heading. To be honest with you, I think
yeah,
that's why this is becoming a problem. Is because the attitude is becoming it's not their movement. They don't have a movement. Why can't they have a movement? Why can't we have a movement for them? Is a better way to say it.
yeah,
Um, I mean, they can't represent themselves, but like I don't know. There are like movements for babies, to not abuse babies. Is it not their movement? I mean, because we're doing it. It's
yeah.
because they can't stand up for themselves, or battered women, battered children. If we stand up for them, is it not their movement? You
Yeah,
know?
I'm not. Maybe they can clarify what they mean by that.
Yeah.
But well, and to this point, they don't talk. I would, that's a follow up thing. I mean, to me, what one of I've done a lot of different forms of advocacy, but the one that I gravitate most to is amplifying the voices of our fellow animals at sanctuary. Because
Yeah.
if I can find a way to get their message, like put them up there as an ambassador for the movement,
Yeah.
they can speak for themselves. I think quite. I think there's examples of videos that have done that. The video that I was I think before, at the beginning, talking about the video that really flipped the switch for me to start living vegan. That final puzzle piece was seeing a mom and child being separated. There's no humans describing the situation. It spoke quite clearly for itself, the situation.
Well, I
So
understand what you're saying, but I would argue that a human had to bring you to that video. So
well,
they
and
weren't
that's
really
another thing.
speaking for themselves because, well, I mean, they might have, but you had to lead the human to them. As a human had to lead a human to the animals for the animals to show the example of themselves. Do you know what I mean?
I do. I think that's a huge challenge for us, is because the victims are invisibilized, and regardless of how we do it, it's trying to shine a light on them.
Yeah.
Um, Yeah, but I mean, I appreciate with technology and so forth, not everybody can visit an animal sanctuary, unfortunately. But I think if they could, then maybe they could figure out on their own. Maybe some people go walking through a field and interact with an individual who's not human, and make the connection that way. I don't know, but the more typical way probably is through a human passing a message. So I do hear that.
Okay, so here Roger says veganism is not hard. In 1945, Watson said that veganism was the opposition of exploitation of all sentient life. It's a justice for all movement that sees the entanglements of issues. Now, that's the thing. There's a website that tries to argue that Donald Watson didn't really mean it for it to be anything much more than a diet in the first place. And now, of course, this website, they show that the definition of veganism has changed about 14 times. It even included honey was allowed at one point. Um, and then it's changed back, and then it really didn't change for animal rights to be mentioned until Leslie Cross came in. And that's what they argue. Now, I know that, it's a website called Vegan Society Today. Now, I know that what they're trying to do is say it's not anything more than diet. They're trying to argue that they don't have to do it. You don't have to be an animal rights activist. But I don't know, Roger. Tell me, has the definition changed at least 14 times? Can you tell me that?
Yeah, I think there's a lot to around that.
Yeah.
I mean, using the focus scope framing, I think another way I would position it is that the dietary aspect is actually the focus, and the scope is the other forms of animal use. Because a lot of those support programs, I think, rightfully focus on the dietary aspect when they first get started, and then become more aware of these other issues. Because I think if someone can really get the dietary aspect, they've conquered the social situations, they've got their day-to-day lives sorted, then the other bits will kind of fall into place. So there
Well,
is
see, that's
that.
the thing, and I've argued this before in a video. I said, I believe that Donald Watson meant it to be more. I do believe that he meant it to be more than a diet. However, I don't think that he was capable of seeing where it would go today, 80 years later, or what it would become, what this movement would become. And so therefore, he might have started it with good intentions, but it's going to evolve. I mean, in 80 years, things change, and just society alone is going to change. So yeah, where the thing is, we have disagreements on where it is now. Like, there's people who believe that all these human issues are part of it, and there's people like me that believes that just brings politics into it, and I just want to focus on the animals. And we'll disagree. We butt heads. We're going to butt heads on that, and
Well, and
that
the
causes
interesting thing
infighting.
Yeah, and the interesting thing I find with that is oftentimes I find the individuals who I've spoken with, who don't want to talk about human issues, oftentimes talk about human comparisons and politics even more than I do. So it's, to me, that's where I think really getting the practicable applications is where that's where, to me, the value is, and I think where we can see the value and the differences maybe. Yeah, because to me, like, what do you resonate at all with the idea of the focus being the other animal injustices, and the scope allowing for all kinds of injustices, be it Earth or
Well, I'm just one
whatever?
of these people that wants to focus on the focus. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
and I agree with that. So when you're saying focus on the focus, where does that leave the scope for you?
The scope is just like we were saying before, just a naturally occurring benefits um, from the focus. Unfortunately, I just think that a lot of people have made the scope the focus. Like we are saying, it's become more human centric. I think that's pretty obvious when we talk about every like people saying you can't ask indigenous people to be vegan, or you can't ask Eskimos to be vegan, or you can't ask poor people to be vegan. You can't ask there's always a reason you can't ask somebody to be vegan anymore. And somebody's trying to shame you that, you're being racist or something because you're asking everybody to be vegan. Well, first of all, I haven't been up to the wilderness in Alaska, or not Alaska, in the Yukon or anything, asking indigenous people to go vegan. I'm on the
Yeah.
internet and I'm on the streets in the middle of the city. Okay. But these things are so often argued anymore. You know what I mean? So
It's
often
used it's
argued.
used as it's used as a distraction, isn't it?
It is.
It's using
Yes.
these extreme situations and applying it
Yes.
to situations that aren't extreme, which I
Yeah.
think we should pull people up on, honestly.
Yeah. And
It's like,
that's
well,
the
does
whole
that apply
point
to your
is
life situation?
is
It's
I
yeah.
think that that's kind of getting out of control nowadays. And I think we're allowing for it if we keep insisting that it's our movement, Whereas if we start to say, no, this is about the non human animals, about the other animals, I think it helps to cut that out a bit more, you know? And I find that a lot of people don't agree that we're animals too unless they want to argue for the human side of it. The only time I hear people bring up, well, we're animals too, or don't get offended by being called an animal too, or want to disagree with that, is when they want it to use it for their own benefit.
I guess it depends on the use. I mean, I use that often in my outreach, and I find that's quite a good way to connect people with our fellow animals because I think, to me, that's one of the quickest ways to challenge human superiority because I think even the word human has separated us from the animal kingdom and other
Yeah.
animals and all that stuff. Whereas I think if we can get people on board that we're in fact hairless apes that are not superior, I mean that's literally to me I think one of the strongest claims we can make. Besides, and then you can get into the kind of the morality of species comparisons and all that
Yeah.
stuff. But yeah, I think to me I don't know about your experience, but to me like 90+% of the disputes I see online and otherwise, it's all around the theory
Yeah.
and not the applications. If not more so, it's very rarely okay. This is the situation. Here's response A. Here's response B. What do we think is correct? You know.
Yeah, there are plant-based people trying to turn veganism into a movement for humans rather than for the animals. Yeah, I mean, you see like your biggest influencers on YouTube, it's all always about food. You go onto a
Mm,
vegan so-called vegan group, insert state here or insert city here, vegan group, and you get thousands of people that are part of that group, and they're all talking about what restaurant they should go to. You put up an animal rights post, and everybody jumps on you. You're being,
okay.
you're being judgmental. You're being a gatekeeper. Blah blah blah. I mean, they get offended. You don't even have to say anything. You just put up an animal rights post, and automatically they accuse you of all these things, and they get mad. And it's like, is this a vegan group? You know, and you're having to
Yeah.
defend
Oh,
yourself in a
it's
vegan group. I even had somebody take down, an admin take down a post because they didn't like the picture that was on the article, and it was just a calf. It was a picture of a calf, and you didn't even get details like if they were in a crate or anything. They were like, "That's too sad. The picture's too sad." I'm sorry, but
yeah.
you know, it,
I've had a lot of frustrations with groups myself.
yeah,
The big frustration for me is when I promote content to try to raise money for a sanctuary or our local one. Which, let's be honest, sanctuaries are struggling. Everyone watching, please support your local animal sanctuary. The cost of a cup of coffee per month could mean a world of difference to them. But anyway, like I mean, literally Facebook groups blocking posts for animal sanctuaries, and I'm like, if we're not supporting
yeah,
animal sanctuaries, like this movement has lost itself in a lot of ways.
yeah.
Not
And so many of those
entirely, but that
groups,
to me is a sign we don't have our focus on the our eyes on the focus
yeah, and that's the
to that
problem.
point.
These groups call themselves vegan, but all it is about food. To where you finally have to start your own group and make sure you put in there animal rights instead. See, that's the thing. Veganism versus animal rights. Is it our movement or theirs? Uh, in the title, it's like, because when you say veganism, too many people focus on humans when it comes to veganism, or that's the first thing they think of. You know what I mean? Hold on, let me catch up with some of these. Guys, I'm not used to reading a whole bunch of comments during this.
It's very, very lively, isn't it?
Yeah, so I
It's great to
apologize. I'm going to
see.
try to go back and keep you guys engaged. I appreciate,
Yeah.
Jeremy, I appreciate you being on here because, as you can see, I have a hard time sometimes putting my thoughts out there verbally. Um, and you're helping me to work that out. And since you're like language is your thing, like I have all these thoughts in my head about it that sound good in my head, and I go to try to verbally put it out there, and I get caught up. I get tripped up on my words or my thoughts, or my thoughts are racing too fast, or I can't catch up. So this is kind of an exercise for me. I would like to get
Yeah.
better at that. I tend to be a little bit better if I can write it down first to get my ideas out. But I need to get better at actually, speaking about it,
Well,
finding the right
yeah.
thing.
I think I understand where you're coming from, and
Yeah.
but yeah, live streams have helped me a lot with that too. And I think generally the audiences are pretty forgiving with live streams versus pre-prepared videos. That it's just like a live conversation in real life, isn't it?
Yeah. So
So
I
I
would
think
agree
that
with you on this, Roger. I would agree with you on this. And I even mentioned this in the last, when I was talking to Serena Farr. I think we have a problem here. You see things like people saying, they're vegan and they're not really vegan. And so then we get statistics of like, oh, the vegan movement or whatever is grown so much. And I don't think we have the right numbers. I don't think, you know,
or we have more vegan options. Because to that earlier point, a lot of non-vegans, speciesists think like as long as there's a vegan option for the vegan
yeah.
will be happy and all this stuff. And it's like
Yeah.
that
And they'll
completely
try it
misses the
out.
point.
They'll try it out, every
Yeah,
once in a
and
while.
that's a good step. But yeah,
Yeah, but they're not serious about the animal rights part. Um, so they just want to try out a Beyond Burger, and so yeah, I would agree with that. The vegan movement is not as big as we imagine. I really don't think that we're getting the right numbers because how can we know when people are just signing off as a vegan on a survey when they're
well,
not?
and I think this came up in my chat with Roger. I think we're shooting ourselves in the foot when we're saying, which doesn't sound like a very vegan thing to do in the first place. But anyway, it sounds pretty violent. But anyway, when we do these surveys, like what brought you here, the animals, the
Yeah.
environment or health and all this stuff, and it's like the whole premise of that question is faulty.
Yeah,
It's
that right there gives off the wrong impression. I think,
yeah, take your
like
pick.
it can be from one
Yeah,
anything else. You know,
framing's everything.
yeah, and that's why I just prefer to frame it as their movement. I'm here for the animals. I just want to be a lawyer or a representative, a lobbyist for them, whatever. And I don't want to make it about me. As soon as you make it about humans or any human issue, we're not going to agree on everything. We're not. Because then you're going to have to tell us, where are we supposed to stand on abortion? Where are we supposed to stand on the Palestinian-Israeli conflict? Where are we? I mean, all these things that we're not going to agree with. We're going to have to agree on all these things. Uh, I think if we could all agree that animals just deserve to have their own bodily autonomy and be left alone and stop exploiting them, I think that's where we would have less infighting if we could just agree on that and to focus on that. That's how I feel about it. And I think it's misunderstood by a lot of people that want to focus on all issues. It's automatically like if I say that I don't want to focus on all those other issues, I want to focus on the animals, or any activist that says that, I think it's automatically assumed that means you're against other people's rights. It doesn't mean that, you
Well,
know?
and that's where I think the distinction is needed. That it is
Yeah.
that just because we're focusing on the focus doesn't mean there's not these other issues, that we can also be aligned on. Because you're right though, we are going to have disagreements. We're all different people with a wide variety of views, but
Well, it's just like
Yeah.
somebody brought up abortion one time. They were like, excuse me. This guy was like, and he was a vegan. And he was trying to make abortion um, a subject, a vegan subject. And he was like, you can't be pro-choice and be vegan. And I'm like, I don't have an opinion on it. I'll be honest with you. I don't really have an opinion. I'm kind of on the fence. I don't know how I feel about it. I'm a 51-year-old woman that's never been pregnant. So I've just never made it my business to have a stance on it. I don't know where I stand on that. And I said that honestly. And that was an automatic, you are for abortion. Which, first of all, I don't know anybody who's
I
for
don't.
abortion.
No one's for abortion.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I hate
That's
when people
trying to
say that.
set a trap from the start, isn't it?
Yeah. I don't know anybody who's for abortion. But that's kind of how it goes with a lot of these human topics. When you involve them, is like, if you don't take a stance on one side or the other, then you're guilty of being the opposite of whatever the person thinks, they are. And that's
To
when we get our
Guy,
infighting.
to Guylin's point, at 734, we need to understand focus and scope, human-centric and animal-centric. Guylin did an
Uh,
excellent video recently on their channel about that. And I don't know if you've seen it, but kind of charted out some thoughts around that.
mhm.
Because, yeah, I do think it's... The theory to me, I don't think we're so different on. And like you say, if people want to do other issues, that's, there's nothing stopping that. So it's to me, I honestly I don't understand what the core disagreement is actually about. But I do, like, to the earlier point, I do think this movement is shifting human centric, and I think we need to address that. That's my big concern, regardless of what the cause is.
Yeah, I think it's become too human centric. It's a problem, and I think that we need to reel it back, and agree at least on one focus. With all these other things, there's so many things that have been brought into this. I mean, there's so many new topics and issues in the human realm that have been brought into this. It's just starting to crowd out the focus, I feel like. You know, so
Yeah,
much
and I
other
guess,
noise is taken over.
well, and I think the other thing is, like, we've all got autonomy as animal advocates. Like, if,
Mhm.
if I want to have 90% of my attention on the focus and 10% left for responding to claims about the scope, and another advocate might want to make it 50-50. Like, that's their prerogative. But,
Yeah,
like,
but I think
almost
we're,
just
we're
kind of,
I think we're dangerously going into the realm of where it's the opposite of what you do, where the focus is 10% and the scope is becoming 90. Like we said before, this is becoming human centric and more human centric with the more and more issues that we have coming up, and it's getting we're getting drowned out. The animals' voices, or the voices for the animals, I believe, are getting drowned out by all the noise.
yeah,
And
and all you have to do is look at the drama and the,
oh
I
yeah,
guess, as you said, vegan community. Like, that gets like 10 times the reach to just like, hey, there's a sanctuary that needs our help, or, these
well, that's
critical
true. And if you
issues.
don't have some kind of, like, yeah, clickbait title to your YouTube, or some kind of conflict going on, people aren't interested in watching. You know,
Oh,
it
and that's a
seems
challenge
like,
with social media, isn't it? Which I
yeah,
think that can play to our benefit, because I think a lot of times, animal videos can get more reach because it is kind of, it gets engagement, and it can be provocative for
well, I
people.
mean,
But
that's
yeah,
why that vegan teacher
it's
does so
counter.
well, because, like,
Yeah.
people, they come in for the drama, and they want to insult her, but in the end they're listening to her message. So that's why she lets it happen, I guess. If you have that thick skin, go for it. But
Well,
what
and
I'm saying is that, you said that we have autonomy, and it should be up to the advocate or the activist of how they want to do it. But I think this is where we again it gets dangerous, because if somebody wants to do, you know, the scope, make 90 opposite of you, like 90% of the scope and 10% focus, that's when we start giving off the wrong message about what it's about.
yeah,
You
and I think
know?
that's, to Guyman's point, more kind of the
Yeah.
human centric side of things. And I
Yeah.
think it gets, another challenging thing is when we something I try not to do is kind of putting labels on people. But I think like if we were to speak about this theoretical situation where people spend very little time on our fellow animals, they're probably more of a human rights advocate. And that's okay,
Yeah.
but they're a human rights advocate, not necessarily an animal rights advocate. If they are 90% spending time on other injustices that are related, but they're not the focus. I think that's the distinction.
Yeah. All right. I'm trying to catch up on some of these. I'm having a hard time scrolling here. I apologize, guys.
Yeah, there's only so much that can be seen on one screen at a time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm seeing if there's anything I want to highlight. So, so what do you think? What do you think is our, fundamentally, how do we come to terms with each other? How do
Yeah.
we all get along? How can we all just get along?
I'd be curious. I don't know how many people are with us, but I'd be curious if anyone can summarize. I know you've got a 200 character limit, which from a personal experience, you can always do a one of two of two comment stuff. But I'd be curious if people in the chat understand what the disagreement is about and think it's exaggerated. I
Okay,
personally think
yeah,
it's
that's a good
exaggerated, and
question.
I think there's a lot like I don't think we're hearing each other, like not you and I, but just generally as a movement,
Yeah.
like or community, however we want to refer to ourselves. Like there's valid points on both sides. I think that just if we just kind of work together more.
All right, Roger says, show me a vegan who wants/does 90% scope and 10% focus. I don't think such a vegan exists. And here's where we go into, are they really vegan? They would consider
Hmm.
themselves vegan. They would consider themselves vegan. Would we consider them vegan? Well, there might be where we argue it also, because we can't seem to decide if scope is as important as the other person does. So I think that's kind of an argument we're having there too. So yeah, are they really vegan? I would say they're not if they're doing it like that.
I would
But
even
some
say
people would say they are.
I would even say for lack of a better term, the holy trinity of animals, earth, humans, health, basically. Like
Yeah,
that trinity automatically puts it 33, 33, 33%. To me, that's already lost the focus.
yeah, I agree with that, and that's why. And I also like that AV took that off their logo. Animals, environment, health,
The
because
only thing is, then they took the animal part off of it. So now
well,
there's nothing
because
that says animals on it.
well,
So,
that's because because we're just focusing in what we're talking about on the animals. So
gotcha. Yeah. And create
um,
more provoke people versus, because
yeah,
yeah,
and they
sometimes if people
also
know too much about it, they won't approach and all that. Yeah.
yeah, because they also discourage us from wearing any kind of vegan t-shirts or anything like that. Mainly because we don't want people to see it from afar and not engage. Some people
Hmm.
will see that and just automatically walk off. You know,
Hmm.
so I think it
I like to
works.
talk a lot about animal use, like the main, like the table runner I have, because I just have a small, like one person setup basically, where I just set up on a public pillar,
Uh
table
huh.
runner, computer, or music, similar setup in a lot of ways. But I just say, like, when it comes to animal use, what does your heart say? So if there's, and it says my website at the bottom, which I guess has the dreaded V word, veganinteractions.com, but it's so small. By the time people get to that, I don't think it's as doesn't put people off as much, but it
Hmm.
is tricky though.
Yeah. So let's see here. I'm Gwen. Sorry, Gwen. I'm trying to scroll up because it's scrolling down. Let's
Yeah,
see
it's
what he's.
743. Yeah.
Jeremy Hess. The disagreement doesn't exist. Other animals only crew are angry at human-centric plant-based welfarists, but mislabeling them as intersectionals and animal-centric intersectionals. I'm
And then there's the next comment finishes
okay.
it.
I'm not really sure if I understand what Gwen is saying.
I might be able to speak to
Feeling
that a
attacked
little.
or okay, so he said animal centric intersectionals are feeling angry and fighting back.
Yeah, and this came up in my chat with Roger too. That if I don't like the whole framing of sides because I by talking about it in sides, it's reinforcing that there's sides, which I don't think there
Yeah.
are. But if we were to say that, I do think that these two sides, these two perspectives, if we're talking about pro human rights or excluding the discussion of human rights, if we were to put it in those crude terms, like a common enemy is the big animal groups that predominantly animal welfare treatment focused.
Yeah, that make it all about animal welfare and get the wrong message out there.
Because the
Yeah.
vast majority of grassroots, I think, agrees on a lot. I'm not saying we agree on everything. I've been around long enough to know that we
Yeah.
don't. But I think generally we agree more than if we were to step in further, like if we're looking at it in
Yeah, and
concentric circles.
yeah, I think you're right. And I mean, like, all right, Roger, you and I don't see eye to eye on uh, fundamentally whether there should be focus and scope or what that should be. But we do agree on a lot of things. And that's what I'm trying to say, that as an example. Roger, I'm sorry to single you out, but you're here. But just to use that as example, I could still agree with Roger on certain things. But if we could all come together under one thing that we agree on, and that's about the animal rights, I think that we could, be allies for the animals. We could be stronger for the animals. I think we become weaker when we allow the scope to start to become bigger. And I think it is, because I think that's the fundamental problem, is that the scope is becoming bigger. It's becoming human centric. And I think that's all we're trying to say here. And with more and more human issues.
You see Roger's last comment.
No, I'm trying to catch
Roger has left the building.
Don't go, Roger. Come on.
That must be his.
Here to spice it up a little bit.
That must be his refugee who's a cat person typing on the computer that Roger's left.
But I just think, that I actually see this like, evolving by becoming a non-human animals only. I think that's an evolution in itself, because I just don't think they have anything else. And I wish that we could have one movement for non-human animals to focus solely on them. We have so many things that focus on humans already, and there's nothing stopping us from getting involved in those either. But to put them all under one umbrella, I think just kind of, it drowns out the non-human animals.
Well, I think to Roger's comment, I mean, the whole reason we started the animal rights show is because the movement is too. I mean, I don't want to overuse the focus scope thing, but it's too focused on animal welfare, which even animal welfare I think is a euphemism, because if it was truly for their welfare, we wouldn't be using them in the breeding, using, and murdering them in the first place. So I tend to talk about treatment versus use.
Yeah.
But the whole reason we set up that show was to shift away from the treatment to the use, which, we can talk about whether that's possible or not either. But
I did a talk
concern.
to a group of students at the local sanctuary, and I talked about the difference between animal rights and animal welfare. And I said, I told them, I said, animal welfare means the animals that are here at the sanctuary would still be would still be at the farm. Animal rights is what got the animals that are at the sanctuary here. There's two different. That's the difference between those. All right, Roger. Again, you said, please show me vegans who are inflating the scope and the expense of the focus. Well, that's where we can get into an argument about whether or not they're really vegan. They might consider themselves vegan, but would we? And I think we might agree on that, or we might disagree. I don't know. I wouldn't know. So, I mean, they might consider themselves vegan, but they think, that you got to worry about indigenous people, so you can't. I don't know.
To me, like, there's the peripheral human rights discussions, I guess. But to me, there's very common examples that the animals or other animals, Earth, Health trilogy. To me, that's the biggest example.
Yeah.
Because a lot of vegans and animal advocates, I think, if they don't hit on those three, they haven't clearly or completely communicated the message. I know I was that way when I first started doing outreach. So that's not necessarily a 90-10 example, but that is an example where the focus isn't at least 50% because it's 33% just by the pure inclusion of the other two.
Yeah, I just see. Yeah, I think the scope has gotten too big. So, where do we sit at, guys? Have we solved anything, or are we just still in the same place we started? So, uh, let's see. What is this? How much of all this is your perception of vegan YouTube versus what you want vegan YouTube to be?
I think there need to be
This,
some specifics to respond to that, because what's the
yeah, I don't.
perception and what's the want?
This really doesn't even have anything to do with YouTube. So, I mean, we're on YouTube, but yeah,
Well, and to that point, because oftentimes what you have is two hairless apes or more discussing these
yeah,
issues. And I think just to point out, I mean, that's why I and yourself have pictures of our fellow animals in screen at least. So even if they're
yeah,
not here in person, there is that balance.
yeah,
So there's a lot of ways to make things animal centric. I think
yeah.
it's just I think we have to for me. I know I'm trying to do this, even though I like to think my advocacy is already pretty animal centric. Everything I do basically, I try to put it through the filter. Is this animal centric? The language, or
Yeah.
even a demo or any of that stuff. And I don't think a lot of us are doing that. I know I wasn't doing it until I became more mindful of it.
Yeah.
Even saying I'm vegan, because this is maybe to the more of the point of your thumbnail. I'm vegan versus I'm an animal advocate. Those two things say very different things, especially to a speciesist audience.
Yeah, exactly. And I've been thinking about it a lot too, about like what do I consider myself? I mean, what do I consider myself now? I mean, I think Seb Alex even came out was talking about this recently, wasn't he? I think he talked about whether he agrees with calling himself vegan or an animal rights activist. And I've been
Who is
wondering
that?
which do I consider Seb Alex?
Oh
Seb,
yeah. I did
yeah,
see that. I just missed that, but yeah. I think it's a fantastic point. I think if to me, veganism is the mechanism for how we respect our fellow animals, and I appreciate
yeah,
it's a. I know Roger will be quick to point out that veganism is a philosophy, which it is, but I think when people are first getting an introduction to it, that's the tangible step.
hmm
At least removing ourselves, and then hopefully we start to oppose it and start to build awareness and all these things.
All right, Roger says in 1954, Cross began an essay. This is an attempt to state in simple terms what veganism is and why and how it came into existence and to suggest what it could mean for mankind. How is that not human centric, though? What it could mean for mankind? I just don't understand how that's not human centric. We always do this in relation to how it affects us, it seems like. That's the problem I have with this kind of language.
Yeah, and I
Um,
think
However, Cross always placed the focus on other animals. Well, it's just like, people are saying that it's our relationship with other animals. It's like that suggests to me saying our relationship with other animals is suggesting to me that they only have worth that we place on them and our relationship with them. What if these animals don't want a relationship with us? They don't want
well,
anything to do with us.
well, and then you get into the language around like the friends not food, which I think is catchy. However, it is like one, it's focusing on the dietary aspects, and
Yeah,
two, like you say, maybe they don't want to be our friends. I mean, that's a
yeah.
discussion we've had in the
Yeah,
past, Roger and I, about like
I never really liked that friends
friends,
not
but
food thing, to tell you the truth.
I mean, it is catchy, and to a non-vegan audience, I
Sure.
think it'd be interesting to know how they interpret it, because it is
Yeah.
really hard to come up with in 3 or 4 words. I struggle with this a lot when I'm
Yeah.
producing content. Like 3 or 4 words to really get a good message across is not easy. So I get that, but it's not to me. It's not about kindness. It's about respect. That's
Yeah.
um,
That's why I said it's not, you don't have to love animals to stand up for their rights. I mean, it's about justice. I'm not particularly fond of some animals, you know? Um,
that doesn't mean you're going to breed, use, or murder them,
yeah,
does
but I'm
it?
not, yeah, I'm not
Exactly.
going to exploit them. I'm not going to, I'm not going to, I still believe they have a right to live their lives peacefully without interference from us. Um, I think that we are responsible to correct and take care of the animals we've domesticated simply because we put them in that situation. Um, but yeah, leave the other animals alone. Maybe they don't want anything to do with us. They don't want a relationship.
To me, and I appreciate this isn't going to be necessarily a commonly held view, but to me, I think of the peripheral things as I think it kind of solves this issue a bit if we just refer to them as bonuses, because we shouldn't murder someone because we shouldn't murder them, and if because of that these other things come, great. Like I think to me
Yeah.
the biggest example, and this is true for me, being a vegan who respects our fellow animals, I'm more respectful of humans and human injustices now. A lot of issues I wasn't aware of beforehand. Same with the environmental stuff. I do think that's a bonus, and it's likely to come from it. But I did it because it was the right thing to do, not because of those bonuses, as it
Yeah,
were.
that's
It's all
that's how
about
I am. I
framing.
do it because it's the right thing to do. I don't necessarily have to. You don't have to necessarily love animals. I'm a bit of a misanthrope. I don't really like people, but I'm not out killing them. you know, I'm not out. I'm not out shooting them. Um,
Yeah.
but see, I think things, Roger. Again, I think things like this. Cross said that animal liberation was human liberation. Again, why does it have to have anything to do with us? I think it comes back again to how it affects us, and I think that's human centric.
Well, and that even
Even though I
implies
have a T-shirt that says that.
well, and that even implies humans aren't animals, which I appreciate as a tricky language thing. But
Yeah, but when you're going to talk,
I just like to talk about all animals. If people want to think of
yeah.
humans as part of that, all animals. Yeah.
Let me see what Brian said here.
I was going to say,
Totally.
Facebook clearly leaves
All
some room for the character limit, doesn't it?
If you lead with the same compassion while outreaching that you found when you first went vegan, you can not fail. I found no compassion. Be honest with you, Brian, I didn't find any compassion when I went vegan. Putting the animals first before your emotions is the best thing we can do for the animals. Paul Bashir explains this in a workshop. Keep it real and tell them the truth. Getting the message correct is all we need to do. Share the truth and hold non-vegans accountable. Thank you, Stacey, for all you. Thank you, Brian. Really
Never meant to make it rhyme.
All right, thank you, Brian. I appreciate that. Let me figure out how to. Okay,
Well, the real quick thing I would say about that is I do think emotion plays a role. Because there's a Tom Reagan quote, the originator of non-rhetorical animal rights, that basically says, like, philosophy or just ideas can lead the mind to water, but emotion is what makes it drinks. Which I think it'd be interesting to know from yourself and those in the comments. I think,
well, I think that
unless we connect with those emotions.
Yeah.
I mean, I appreciate on outreach, we're not just going to walk up to somebody and,
I
and
think
lose
he
it before
means
you
when
even
we're
started.
doing outreach, we need to put our emotions behind us, because we have to be clear-headed and with the facts. So,
or mirroring, because if you're with someone who's having an emotional reaction, I think it can actually be quite powerful to actually go there with them.
Yeah.
And say, actually, this, I think that, it might make
Oh,
them
I
feel
had a
more
guy
understood.
I had a guy who just full on broke down crying in front of our cube one time, and I went over and I gave him a big hug, and I just stood there with him while we cried. But yeah, I mean, of course, but yeah, I kind of understand what he means. I mean, we want to even though I say it's about justice, we still want to appeal to people's emotions, because that's what helps trigger somebody with a connection there. But it doesn't have to be. Again, like I said, you don't have to love animals in order to see that it's just about justice. It's unfair, to exploit them.
Well, and that's something that's come up in past chats is like, shouldn't respect and justice for our fellow animals be enough? And I appreciate, like, humans are selfish and we can get into all that, but, like, to me, we should be focusing on the non-vegans where it is enough. Like, it's 99% of the population that supports animal use. Like, we've got a lot of people to choose from. I don't think we should soften our message just to appeal to more people. We might be able to say, to the earlier discussion, we might be able to say more of the world's vegan, but where does that get us from a messaging perspective?
Is that your sister? Or is that your mom? That's your mom.
My mom's in the house, yeah, who just moved actually from Cincinnati to Bloomington. We were just talking about
Jeremy's
that before.
Mom. We're just talking about. I'm in Cincinnati, Mrs. Hess. Okay, Ms. Hess.
Yeah,
I don't know.
My mom probably remembers, what was it, Bethesda North Hospital, where I was brought onto this blue marble.
So yeah. So I didn't give that little bit of trivia from earlier. Jeremy grew up here in Cincinnati, where I live. I grew up
Isn't
there
that funny?
too.
I'm in the UK now, and we're having
Yeah.
the live streaming. Yeah.
How's the weather over there, by the way? How is it over there in the UK?
Pretty rainy,
Yeah.
but it's been nice. We've had some really hot weather, which the
It
thing,
was so hot today. So hot.
well, and on a bit of a serious point, like I think especially, I focus on the sanctuary, but I appreciate it's other animals who are also impacted by this. But the heat's really challenging
Yeah.
for them. So
Yeah, lots of pictures
yeah,
of
I'm quite
pigs in the mud.
yeah, I'm quite happy to have some rainy weather because I know that the survivors at Friend and other sanctuaries are a bit more comfortable. So
Yeah,
I don't
we
mind a
had
bit of rain for
a
that.
hard storm in the middle of the afternoon yesterday, and then it went away. But yeah, it helped cool things down. So your mom says it's Christ Hospital. I live right down the street from Christ Hospital. I
Well,
live next
yeah,
to
it's a good thing my
UC.
mom's here to set me straight.
Yeah, you don't even know where you were born, Jeremy.
It's not a
Yeah,
question that comes up often, so
I live right next to UC, so I'm right down the street from Christ Hospital. I can walk there. So
there you
the
go.
hospital I was born in Lafayette, Indiana, and it's actually been torn down from what I think my mom told me that. So it's gone. Like my
Okay.
high school's gone. I'm old. I'm freaking old. My high school's gone. My hospital's gone. They're
So
like,
it's
get out of here, Stacy. No,
hopefully you can still
no
do
more rain.
reunions and the like if you wanted to, but just can't go back there.
Bo's saying, oh, she's in West Canada, 117 degrees.
Wow. And for Canada, that's exceptional.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Wow.
I'm not a climate scientist, but sounds
Yeah,
like the
that
planet's
is a
trying to
problem
tell us something.
when people aren't used to that and they don't have AC because they're not used to that kind of temperature. That's really bad.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think about free living beings and also obviously other animals who are used.
Wait. Okay,
Yeah.
Marley, I'm not sure. It says it's scary, to be honest, the idea of talking to the public and getting mixed emotional responses. Do you mean about doing outreach? Is that what you're talking about? Because we got off track there. We're talking about
Yeah,
hospital.
because that could be might be helpful to explore a little bit because I think there's so many forms of advocacy we can all do, and maybe street outreach appeals to some, maybe it doesn't, because you're
Yeah.
talking about kind of written versus in person, like that.
Well,
That's
when I'm doing my outreach for a cube, it's different than like just getting my personal thoughts out because
mm,
I pretty much have got there's kind of a script that facts that we stick to, just so that we're all on the same page when we're doing our outreach. And I can put in, here and there my own personality, but it's something I've been skilled at. Doing this kind of thing is not something I've been doing for a long time. So even before I became even before I started up with AV, I was kind of doing my own activism. I would talk to people in restaurants, and talk to my guy at the gas station, stuff like that. So really doing the cubes is just a natural extension of that. That's why I felt
mm,
comfortable doing it because it was kind of a natural extension of what I already do. But this kind of interaction, these lives and stuff, getting my own personal thoughts out there on other views, you know what I mean? Not just facts about the animals. Um, yeah, I still gotta get comfortable with that. I still gotta work that out. So
well, yeah, in live streams, I know I've heard some interesting stats about that. That because I don't think our human minds, like just the delay in the video is just enough to it's difficult to process. Because I know with COVID and more of us doing video chats, I think it's
yeah,
quite hard on a lot of people that are on video chats most of the day. Where it's kind of an unnatural
yeah,
interaction in a lot of ways. But yeah, I guess to Marley's point, I mean, I think there's so much that we could do in a written form. I mean, obviously, like comment sections on social media is an example, or there's loads of different things from a written,
yeah. There's all kinds
blogs,
of
all
ways
kinds of
to do
things.
activism. Whatever you're comfortable with. I just think people just need to be active. You know. That's another question. Roger was saying, what vegan does that kind of activism? What would you say? Would you say that we could argue that you're not really a vegan if you're not an activist? Some people could argue that.
Yeah, and that's where I think going back to definitions, I think the 88 definition, which we have like an hour section for the animal rights show, that it wasn't a lie, but it was like, I think it's on Roger's channel only. But we did a whole hour about unpacking the 88 definition, and the biggest thing is the seeks to avoid versus opposes.
Yeah,
That's such different language, because opposes kind of implies some
sure.
level of advocacy.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Well, I'll have to check that out. But we've been on here for a little over an hour, so I don't want to take up your whole day. I did have a long day out in the heat because I worked out. I work outside with the dogs. So I was so happy to get home and just jump in the shower before we did this. So
Well,
I
well,
won't
yeah,
take
yeah.
the. Go ahead.
To that, I was just gonna say to that point. Do you want to share maybe some quick? Because I mean, you've been helping care for and teach, dog people, individuals who are dogs for a number of years, right? I mean, do you have any recommendations for those watching, like how to interact with our fellow animals, be it at sanctuary or just anywhere in our
Well, I'd
lives?
like to hear your thoughts because you're better on the sanctuary part. As far as animals go, yeah, it's respecting them. It's reading their body language. Um, it's like a lot of people think it's okay for a screaming kid to run up to a strange dog because they, mean well. That's scary. You got to remember that dog. It's scary for that dog. That dog can't run away. So, dogs bite out of fear more than they bite out of anger. So, if a child ever do always ask the person first if they're walking down the street with a dog. Ask if you can pet the dog, and don't be mad if they say no. They know their dog better than you do. So, but yeah, especially with children, you should always have your hand down. I always have to tell people, don't put your hand over a dog's head. Don't go up and pet a dog by put a hand over their head. That's very intimidating. That's a stranger
Mm.
doing that. They don't, they're very vulnerable. You put it down. You put your hand down, and you let them sniff you. Let them come to you. So that's all the advice I really have for them. Why don't you give us a little advice about interacting with sanctuary?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting to me, just animal behavior in general, because I first came to it helping out at the RSPCA in Singapore.
Uh-huh.
So dogs, and there's a few cats and others, but mostly dogs, and just some of them were so, I don't know a better word for it than institutionalized, and they literally, like, we just try to get them out for a short walk, and it was hard to do just that. And the thing I've really found, I think you're right with the handover, that, if we were to do that to a human, it could be considered an attack. And I can see how an individual who's a dog could think the same thing. So just being non-confrontational. But one of the biggest things I learned at that during that time is kneeling down and making ourselves smaller. Even a cow who's several times our size, they're really shy, a lot of them,
Yeah.
in my experience. So actually, I find kneeling down and just letting them approach me, and
Yep.
even turning so my back's facing them, is even less
And that's
intimidating,
how
so
we
they can come
approach new
up.
dogs too when they come into where I work at too. So
Yeah, I
yeah.
honestly, I think, to me, when we look at all animals, they're really just individuals in different bodies. So I think a lot of the body language stuff you've observed with dogs, I suspect a lot of it would carry over to sanctuary.
Yeah.
But you're
Yeah, I
right.
suspect it would.
The fear thing is big. I know I'm very careful, especially if I'm walking behind someone, to talk to them. Because if I talk to them, then they're less likely to be startled when I'm all of a sudden next to them. If I'm just sweeping something up or something.
Yeah.
And that's from chickens to cows. It doesn't matter their size. Just out of a sign of respect for them, like, hey, I need to come here real quick. How you doing, kind of thing. Versus just walking up and all of a sudden they're like, hey, how'd you get here? Because some of them are disabled, their hearing's not great, their vision's not great, and being mindful of that.
Oh yeah, definitely. Or they've been abused, neglected, or whatever. Bad interactions with humans, or maybe no interactions with humans. For all we know, maybe they were isolated. Should I even bother to go with the?
Roger
Okay,
doesn't
sure.
want
'Cause
this live stream to last an hour, I don't think.
Yeah. Did you say that there should be no infighting? I said, yeah. I said I wish there was no infighting. We should march alongside someone who wishes fur wearers raped, a white man in a patriarchal culture advocating violence to women. You know, shit in one hand and wish in the other. See which one gets full faster. That's what my dad used to say. The way I look at it is a lot of people have their own private thoughts, and you can't possibly know. Are you going to go around to everybody well, I don't know who you're talking about, Gary Yourofsky. I don't exactly go around like, promoting him. So if, but I'm not going to, yeah, I'll be in a march with him. So, I mean, I'm sorry, I'll be in a march with him. He could say he wishes whatever he wants to. That's not the same act as what the fur, wearer paid for. The way I look at it, you could ask me, wishes this stuff, but what are these people who are wearing the fur? What are they doing? They're anally electrocuting. They really are anally electrocuting animals. They're paying for that. So which do you think is worse?
It kind of segues into like a bigger topic of whether or not violence solves anything. And I appreciate what you're saying, that there's not literal violence; it's the thought of violence. It's a tricky one, because I don't think, and it goes back to appealing to humans and all that stuff. I think if we were them, that maybe if we were other animals being reduced and murdered,
we're more worried
if we were
about
them, it's
police
difficult.
here, and words, and what a person's hurt feelings, a human's hurt feelings in this situation over over what has actually happened to thousands of animals is the way I look at it.
I think the difficult thing with this is, I think this is a decade old, and there
Yeah,
hasn't
it
been
is.
an update. There hasn't been an update. It's been silent for about a decade.
Yeah, and there
I
was
know there's
even a
been some
point where I
activity on his
wasn't even,
channel, but
where I was not. Gary had some things to say about Palestine that made me hate him for a while. I'm not. I don't go around touting him. I think that his speech was very impactful, and I think that it has helped a lot of people become active. I was already vegan when I saw his speech. I was already vegan before I saw Earthlings, but once I saw those two things, it did make me much more vocal. And it probably helped push me to become an activist.
well, and I think I think you touched on a really critical point there, because I think, I mean, that the theoretical consistencies or inconsistencies is to me a separate but related topic. But to me, like, what you just said there about like something that he said around Palestine made you hate him. Like, one of the big things, the book I mentioned at the beginning of the live stream, one of the things I learned in that was that, from a psychology perspective, that the biggest influence on whether or not somebody actually acts on a change is their relationship with the change agent. There's obviously not always just one person, but if we hate the person that's trying to talk to us about a change, we're probably going to be less likely to do it. And I agree, this is challenging with the human-centric versus animal-centric, but like it or not, our audience is humans. So I think that's where knowledge of psychology, and I'm not saying lose our assertiveness and lose a clear, direct abolitionist message. I think we keep that, but I do think that mindfulness of how messages are received is important. But I appreciate that's kind of a crude summary of a lot of different topics that relate to that.
Yeah.
So that's where, regardless of like thinking this, I do think that if someone is hates this comment, it's more likely to push them away from respecting our fellow animals versus towards it, regardless.
Well, that's
of
kind of like
stuff.
saying, a vegan was mean to me, so I'm going to go eat meat. I mean, we can't,
True. Yeah, but we do have some control over that, though. I mean, if we just go up and spit in everyone's face versus because your outreach, you don't like just, like spit in people's faces. You have a conversation with them. So it's, and that's because that's more effective than just going over to them and throwing paint on them, for instance. And hey, there's.
Well, no, I mean, I don't do direct action because it's not particularly my type of activism, but I more power to those that do. If that's what they want to do, I just, I think we need all types of activism, because obviously if DXE, for example, has so many people willing to do that activism, they appeal to those people. They appeal to that type of personality. So we need that people like them, even though it's not my style, to appeal to those type of people.
Oh, I think I'm very slow. I mean, I've got my views, which I'm happy to share, but I'm very hesitant to share like one form of advocacy versus another, because I think honestly we're all kind of throwing darts in the dark in a lot of ways. None of us knows what would work, otherwise we'd do it and we'd be there.
All you can
So
do
we're trying
is
different
be the
things.
best at the style that you are, or the style that
Yep.
you have. Be the best at that, and you're going to come around. Because they say be the advocate or be the activist that you wish you had met before you went vegan. Well, I am. I'm being the activist I wish I had met. I'm the type of person that likes it straightforward. I'm not offended by what Gary Yourofsky said about wanting to, fur wearers to be raped. It doesn't offend me. So his statements about Palestine made me mad, but that kind of stuff doesn't offend me. So I'm a different personality than the person who would be offended by that. I'm more of a straightforward type of person, and I wish I had met somebody that was straightforward when I wasn't vegan, because it took me a long time. And now I don't feel like I owe the human race anything when I don't feel like, see, that's another thing. I don't feel like my activism owes humans anything. I didn't become a vegan or an activist for humans. I feel like I owe it to the animals because they're the ones that I hurt with my actions all those years that I wasn't vegan. I don't feel like I owe it to humans. Humans screw me over all the time. I think I'm already paying them a favor by not being violent towards them and not, robbing them and not, but I'm doing this for the animals because I feel like I owed them. And, no, I mean, that's the thing. I'm a different type of person than somebody who's going to be offended by what Gary Yourofsky said about fur wearers. It doesn't offend me because it's just thoughts. It's
Well, and
just
I know
words.
there's been recent stuff on his channel that promotes human rights, like literally saying there was one video that was like,
See, I don't even watch his channel, so I don't know.
I mean, this is going back several months too.
Yeah.
It was more when it first came up, but it was basically trying to counter, I think, some of these claims. So it'd be, I don't know. I don't know if we'll ever hear from him or not, but
Yeah.
I mean, he's probably the only one that can provide clarity on those things.
I mean, sure, Gary Yourofsky probably said some shocking things from back in the day, but you know what? If you've read any of the comments, like, for example, what these kids say on, like, that vegan teacher's videos, some of the vulgar, horrible, callous things, these are children saying this. You should be more offended by that. And they're talking about how they want to, they're not vegans. And we're supposed to get offended by, what Gary Yourofsky said about what he wishes on somebody. He didn't do it to anybody. It's just words.
Well, and I do think just in general, focusing on ourselves versus looking at others for guidance, like, because, yeah, I think if we focus on our own advocacy, the movement would be a whole lot better off. And I'm not saying don't collaborate, but I think we're so focused on what other people are doing, versus just kind of getting on with it.
Yeah.
Asterisk, obviously, there's some things that need to be talked about.
You know what?
But
I would just be in the march. I wouldn't be fucking care. I wouldn't make it my business. Who else was marching in it? I'm marching for the animals. I'm not going to make it my business to police who's marching along.
I guess the counter to that is the people who wouldn't show up because of that. So we're actually making the movement smaller in a way by everybody marching together. So that's but I appreciate that's probably another live stream.
No, we're not making it smaller. It's the people who refuse to put their egos aside and make it about the animals. See, we're right back at the beginning. Make it about the animals. They're the ones making it smaller. I'm there to march for the animals. I don't care who's next to me. I'm not. It's none of my business.
What if that person being next to you is keeping other people from joining?
Nobody's keeping other people from joining. Those people are keeping themselves from joining.
Would you, I mean, just if we were to test the extremes of this position, what about someone who's a neo-Nazi?
How would I know they're a neo-Nazi? How would I know that? Are they going to come to the... Huh?
They're open. Let's say they're open about it. I mean, I can send you some websites where people are open about that.
Well, I'm still going to march for the animals. It has nothing to do with that person. I can't. It's a free world. I can't stop them from doing. If it's an open march, I can't stop them.
We can't stop people from using our fellow animals either, but we can talk to them about it.
Well, yeah, I could say something to the person if I felt like it, but that doesn't mean I could. I'm not going to keep it from me standing up for the animals. Do you understand what I
Yeah,
mean?
I don't think it should. I absolutely think we should stand up for them. I just think there's ramifications for these things, bigger than just let's get everybody there, because we're complex creatures, and some humans would not show up if they feel threatened. If I was black, I probably wouldn't show up to a march where there's neo-Nazis unless it was to protest them, and then the
See,
focus of
you're
animal,
just
our fellow
talking
animals get
about a
lost again.
scenario that I've never found myself in, and I doubt I would find myself in.
But
I
that's
mean,
everyone. So that's like hopefully an example that wouldn't include everyone. That's the thought process there. But yeah, I don't know.
oh, hey,
Maybe
Grumpy.
yeah,
Hey, Danny's
Grumpy's
here.
joined us.
Hi. We're just about at the end of this. It's
So
been,
we thought.
yeah, been like an hour and 20 minutes, but I really appreciate you hanging around, Jeremy. I really
I know you've
do.
had a day in the heat.
Yeah.
This is kind of my jam. I like these
This is
chats a whole
just
lot, but
basically in the end, it's something we need to actually have conversations about instead of shutting each other down about. And
agreed.
and we might agree on some things. And if we could all just agree to on the animals part, for their sake, it's kind of like, let's look at it this way. Let's say each side is one half of a divorced couple that has a kid, and that's the animal rights. Okay, can we just be good parents in front of the kid? Can we just get along in front of the kid?
Yeah, I do think for the most part, I think most of our discussion could probably be put in that category where I think the idea of the conflict is much bigger than the conflict itself. I would definitely sign off on that.
I think so too. Oh my goodness! So Grumpy just said a kid's been run over outside his house. So well, I hope that child's going to be all right.
A human child or
Yeah,
a
a human
fellow
child
animal?
or
Um,
oh, well, anyway, I hope whoever it was is going to be okay. Okay, guys. So, yeah, Roger, I don't care for Cranky much either, and but you know what? I would still march with him. I'd march with you, even though we don't agree on this. So as long as it's for the animals, I'm marching for the animals. Not, I don't worry about who I'm marching with so much as who I'm marching for, because I'm usually minding my own business stuff. Or I went with enough friends. Anyway, let's end on a good note. We should continue. What's that?
I was just gonna say real quickly, marches are really great. Beyond, I don't know
Yeah.
how much awareness building they do, but it's such a nice feeling. If anybody who hasn't been to march in the chat, I encourage you to do one, big or small, just because having that many animal advocates in the same place is such a cathartic experience.
Yep.
So yeah,
It is. I haven't been to. Trying to remember the last march I was at. I think it was in Toronto. So it's been a while, but yeah, definitely. And yeah. Let's all get along for the animals. I wish. Never gonna happen. But let's keep trying. Let's keep trying. Let's keep talking.
gotta try, don't we? I think you're right, though. So much of this, what I found is, and Roger and I got in an argument actually in a comment thread, and then we got on a live stream and still argued a bit. But it's so much more productive just to call someone, especially when we know people.
Yeah.
Pick up the phone and call each other versus comment threads are just I just unless it's very small stuff, it's very difficult to explore complex stuff.
Here's Danny being cheeky. Oh, thanks, Danny. Thank you. He's sending me a gift for my birthday. It's not a neo-Nazi shirt. He's having fun with all that. So.
This is on the internet forever. You know what people do? They take a 10-second snippet, and all of a sudden
it's an animal rights shirt. So
it is.
And he and I are probably going to do a live because his birthday and my birthday are a couple days apart. So we're talking about maybe doing a live stream, and I'm going to figure out where that is because I also want to do a potluck and fundraiser at the local sanctuary, and so I work all that out. But everybody stay tuned, and hopefully we'll have an on-air party. Everybody's invited, Roger, even you.
Marley says, when is your birthday? I don't know if you're comfortable that knowledge being public.
I think Danny's is the 19th the next month, and mine's the 21st. So.
Oh, that is really close.
Well, I mean, it's okay if we tell people, because if we do a live stream, people are going to know.
Fair enough.
Yeah. And I've already told my age, so it's too late for that. That's already been revealed. So, anyway, you know what? Thank you so much, Jeremy. I appreciate you hanging out, doing this with me. Um, maybe we can revisit it down the line, or maybe another subject. But I do appreciate language. I am trying to be a little more. Just recognize it a little bit more in myself, and I just happen to recognize it in others a little bit more nowadays too. So yeah, something fun to talk about. So definitely, language is always interesting. You're right; it
Cool.
is kind of like a chess game. It is.
Oh, and it's everywhere we look. I mean, I'll think, bullseye, for instance. Something like you're on point with something. It's like, wait, actually, what's the origin and what's the current interpretation? It's like, actually, this is literally talking about
Yeah,
shooting someone in the eye. Like,
yeah.
the language is just
But
such a
see, that's why
huge.
I said this is good and helpful, because that's part of,
Yeah.
like, learning to get that language out there like this. So get my thoughts out there. So guys, we're gonna end the broadcast. Oh,
I'm
Grumpy's asking if you're up for streaming with him soon.
I'm always up for a stream with anyone. So yeah, my contacts on the about section of my YouTube channel, or I'm on Facebook, same name.
And
So yeah,
I'm gonna add it to this when it posts up on my YouTube. I'll add your information, Jeremy. So
cool.
thanks everybody that came and stayed and didn't kill each other. So
Hopefully we move the peanut forward. Hopefully.
all right, everybody. Good night.
Bye everyone.